Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good, Jay White. I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Me too. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. It's very exciting. Somebody's already got an emoji there. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but
maybe it was because you brought me in first. Everybody's used to seeing you first. You brought me in first.
Yeah, because it's all about me, and we better remember that.
Yeah, we need to rename this. This isn't the rope reporting. This is the Jenny White expose.
That's exactly right. The Jenny White Show. Get it right.
Jenny White Show.
And I'm just now noticing I have no earphones in, and my audio is coming out of my computer. So that should be really great once we get.
Oh, there we go.
Figure out how to mess around with that in a little bit.
Yeah,
so we
low tech.
Do what?
I said you're going low tech, no earphones.
Oh, I know. What's the matter with me? Well, no, let's not go down.
Maybe you have too much raw milk. Maybe that's it. Maybe you're drinking too much raw milk.
Amber said good morning. Amber's on. Good morning, Amber. Nice to hear from you. Okay, I'm going to see if I can't fix my audio here 1 second and make it actually function. I have no idea what I'm doing now. All right, let's try this. Did that work? No, we're still not getting anywhere.
Hey, there's Julia.
There we go. Yeah, I saw Julia was the one that made the comment this morning.
Well, she says your audio's fine, but maybe it's what you're listening to yourself back out of your computer.
Oh, maybe. Okay, well, so we're on the road now.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear you fine.
So we missed you last week.
Yeah, I had a lot of computer issues. I don't know. We had those storms, and I think it blew out my RAM card or something in my computer.
Yeah, I think I said something like, wouldn't it be nice if you plugged it into a surge protector?
Oh, I didn't have it plugged in. One of my kids did.
Oh, see, that I need to get my kids all back home so I can blame my kids for everything.
Oh. You know, it's funny when, since I was the oldest of three and my mom, she was always joking, you know, I was blaming my younger brother. So
it's Greg, a pattern with you then.
Yeah. He was always blaming my youngest brother, Mark. And then Mark was always blaming the dog. That was the sequence of events at our house.
That's so funny. We actually had that happen one time. The boys were running around in the house and broke one of my lamps. And Coleman actually blamed it on the dog.
Maybe it was the dog.
Yeah, I'm sure it was the dog. He was a little big she was a little big to get in the way. So anything exciting going on in the world of finance so we can get rolling here this morning?
No, I mean, outside of just massive debt, massive deficit. And I mean, we're at the point to where $35 trillion, $36 trillion isn't enough money, and we're having to pump more money into the issue, and we're just devaluing our dollar. I need to bring up, I'll bring this up on the next show. I was just looking at a dollar valuation graph from one of the, like maybe the Boston Federal Reserve. And it literally just shows the last 10 years, just the dollar value going like this over just the last 10 years with the amount of money that's been printed. And that, I mean, we're just going to see that acceleration. I mean, the dollar's not necessarily going to disappear, just like the pound didn't disappear after, you know, the British weren't the world order anymore. So, but what we're going to see is the dollar's going to go the way of, you know, it takes $10 to buy a loaf of bread.
Well, I do think there's that. When we adopted our daughters from Zambia in Africa, and when I went over there to get them, one kwacha, which is what their, you know, form of currency was called, one kwacha was worth $1. I'm sorry, $1 was worth 1,750 kwacha.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm even though, you know, I think Trump is going to be 10 times better for the country and the economy. The problem is Trump is big Wall Street guy. Trump is a big bank guy. Trump is a big debt guy.
Yeah.
So he's going to tell the Federal Reserve, just like last time, lower rates. All that's going to do is put more money in supply, which is in turn going to create more inflation. I mean, so there's good and bad.
We'll have better financial advisors than the last time around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's hope. So, well, so did you, I don't know if you saw this or not, but on Monday, I went to the Capitol and talked to some press people. Oh, that's right. You were there.
Yeah, I was there. That was pretty interesting. I'm glad I was there. You know, what's so funny is the press always act like they're so astute. They're with it. They know they've got all these intelligent questions. Yet they didn't even ask any of the right questions or really have a concept, in my opinion, Jenny, because I mean, you gave a pretty long press conference, and outside of maybe Mick's show, I don't think anyone has the entire press conference, do they? Or did they?
No, I don't think so. I think Mick was the only one that did it.
So, you know, the context of that, just like anything, I mean, they can just piece it out to kind of make it look like whatever. But I don't think anyone, first of all, I don't even know if they read the actual
lawsuit.
Yeah, lawsuit.
Yeah.
Pleading there. But at the same time, you know, they just didn't really have a concept of what actually happened and why, you know, you're bringing that suit forward.
I was going to share my screen so that you can see this one window that has the lawsuit in it. So because people have asked, you know, they're like, can I see the lawsuit? So here is the lawsuit. This is what was filed.
And if I can say something real quick, you do have a give, send, go for that. We do need to raise money for that lawsuit. There are going to be expenses incurred on that, even though Mike is working on that in a pro bono fashion.
Yeah.
But we do need to raise money for that suit.
Yes, I completely agree. And I will put I think I can find the give, send, go. Oh, here it is right here. It's really easy.
Can you attach that to the Rope website too?
Yeah, I probably should do that.
Can you put it on the front page of Rope so we can tell people to go to Rope and just click, you know, help Jenny or something?
There it is. Notice I made it say follow Oklahoma election law.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't have any problem figuring out what that is. So that's my give, send, go. So spread it around if you can.
Yeah.
But you know what we were talking, I'm going to bring Wendi in here if she's ready. Is Wendi ready? So I don't just, okay. So I was going to bring Wendi in here because we were talking about this last night. I have to cough, so hang on one second. I didn't want to do that right into my microphone. Wendi and I were talking about this last night, and about the fact that, just like you brought up, Michael, because you and I were talking about it, there just weren't the right questions asked. And I was so glad Robin Carter was there, and she asked a question, and then Vince Scofus was there and he asked a question. And it was kind of, I don't think the media, I don't think the press really heard that and put two and two together.
Well,
and
hang on. I was standing next to Robin when she asked that question, and you should have seen all the press corps turn around and just stare her down for asking a question. It was like hilarious.
Yeah, it was funny. It was. What did she ask though? I know what Vince asked, but I forgot what Robin asked.
I don't remember now what she asked.
Shoot, it was a really good question too.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Wendi? Did
No,
you see it?
Wendi
I
wasn't
was
there.
not there.
Not there.
I did not make your press conference. I was reading.
I'm hanging up on you. You're out. Yeah, but Vince asked a really good one, and he said, what did he say? He said, "What is the standard operating procedure for the Oklahoma County Election Board currently?" And we need to have it. I really need to have one of
the
I need to have one of the election
SOP
guys come on. But everything that I've heard, they're doing now, they're allowing the election board people in to see the absentee ballots and while they're being counted. So
isn't that supposed to happen in the first place?
That's a positive change. That's supposed to be done in the first place. Yes.
And that's a good point that you make, Wendi, because I said this in the press conference. I hate suing the government. I hate it because it just screws over taxpayers, because guess who's paying the bills for that? The taxpayer. And I absolutely hate it. I mean, I just can't stand it. But here's the other thing. We have an administrative state, and it's not just the state election board. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
We have literally worked ourselves because we, the people, have not gone to these meetings. We haven't been engaged. We haven't been involved. The administrative state has just taken over. And Michael, you and I were talking about this yesterday. One of the biggest things that I think may even help our case, but it's certainly going to help compress this idea of administrative overrule, and that's the Chevron dissent. And the Supreme Court just ruled, I think was it Monday? Monday, I think they ruled against the Chevron dissent. And the Chevron dissent was this. So let's say what I'm doing happened. So somebody sued an election board official for something. Well, the election board at that point in time, or anybody, you remember what it was EPA, I think, that finally got him. So people were suing EPA, and EPA would just come back and say, hey, we have administrative rule. I mean, we have the ability to administrate these rules and these laws, and that's what we're doing. And that was their defense. So it was like they didn't really have to follow the law so long as they could prove that they were administrating the law, which isn't the same. It isn't the same. So, oh, Amber, as a taxpayer, I want my money spent on to ensure we have transparency in our elections. The lawsuit is part of that transparency cost. Well, that is a very sweet thing to say, and I hadn't even thought about that. But I do think you're right about that. I mean, I do think that when we feel like we've been wronged by the government, we should be able to sue. I mean, that's what we should be able to do. I'm making rhyme, sue and do. That should be what we do. I just hate the fact that, we end up having to pay for that twice. Like we talked about in our lawsuit with Stillwater Public Schools.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. But the Chevron dissent, I think, is, I really do believe that that's going to probably be one of the most important Supreme Court cases we'll find in recent history, because I do believe that just overall what's happened in government is We quit following the law because we're administrating the law, and administrating the law is not necessarily following the law.
Yeah.
And that's been the problem all along.
Well,
is we have to stop that nonsense.
And I think that's the case that, you know, there's a clear case for that. I mean, that's where you have these unelected administrators that basically write their own rules on how things are going to happen within all these different departments or agencies or whatever. And we see that clear as day, clear as a bell with the way the county election is run here with our local administrator, unelected administrator, Paul Zuriax.
Well, and I will say this. Anytime an unelected official can administrate a law instead of following it, everybody loses. And I don't think this is a partisan issue. And I really want to make sure that that's said from the rooftops. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Libertarian or an Independent or a Republican. I don't even care. Everybody should care that the law is followed, not just for elections, but every single thing. And, you know, I was talking with, I was another guy who was there at the Capitol on Monday, and I was talking with him briefly. And I have been, because I was mayor, I was on a number of boards at the time. And they weren't nonprofit boards. They were all kind of ancillary to government structure, but they weren't government boards. They were just ancillary to government structure. And it was absolutely shocking to me. The people who sit on these boards that oversee these groups that influence the government, ask me how many times I sat in a meeting and saw people who were prepared to be in the meeting, who had read the agenda, who had read their notes, who knew what was going. Ask me how many times.
How many times, Jenny? 1, 0, oh, 0. Yeah.
I mean, and here Julia says government is just another group of people that have decided they can take as much of people's money as they want and get away with. I'm not.
Yeah. 100%.
And they can break any rules they can get away with. It's been that way at least since the states were no longer able to leave the union. That's true.
Right. Well,
once they got it trapped in there, it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Well, that's just the way it works.
Yeah, that's like the whole crux of everything. You know, we say we're so free. We say, I mean, we're not in any capacity. We're not just, you know, like you always say, Jenny, don't pay your house taxes and see what happens. How free are you to live in your own house, in your own property? You know, how free is that? I mean, we're administrated. We're literally just administrated to death across the board.
You guys are going to die laughing. I hope I can see this. Let me bring this up so that you can see this. So I got because we have a YouTube account, right? We have notifications. Oh, here it is. Are you ready for this? I'm going to see if I can share my screen just so you can see the whole thing, because it was so funny. Hang on.
Are we being administrated by Google?
Oh, no, that's actually not what's going on. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can share the window. All right, here's the window. It may look funky. Yeah, it's going to look funky, I think. Let's see. Let's see if you can read it. Now it's going to do that funky thing. Okay, so this is on the True School Choices Eliminating Property Taxes video, the little short that I did with Sherry Connolly from the day that we missed you. American Jesus Show 4087, and it's got a picture of Cartman on it. Okay. Says also, it's not your property. If you own property, you have to form your own country. We, the people, own all the property in the U.S. We just let you use it, and the government can take it if it wants to, because it doesn't belong to you in any real sense of the word.
Wow.
And somebody liked that.
Wow.
Hey, I guess we the people, that just means the government, period. That doesn't actually mean we the people.
Oh, there are actually some really legitimately ignorant comments besides that one on this particular video. I mean, that one is, so one guy says 90% of my tax is school taxes and I've never had kids, so why am I paying? And then this is always my favorite one. This is the answer. A certain percentage of my tax is public highways and I don't drive, so why am I paying? And then the American Jesus Show, 4087, comes back and says, you never went to school? Oh, my goodness. Honestly, I don't even know how you become so ignorant that you can say that we, the people, own all the property and you don't have individual property rights. And this is, I think, probably the biggest thing. I know, it's so funny. We're all like laughing. It's like, who would
sad.
even
It's literally sad.
You're speechless.
Well, and here's the thing, you know that this is a product of not teaching civics and American government in school. Because if anybody read the Constitution, they would have a giant clue that the whole Constitution, even jurisprudence, is based on the whole idea of individual property. Yeah. Everything. What's a contract? Individual property. Everything is based on individual property. So this numbnut, oops, sorry. This ignorant fellow is just, is out. Who says that? Oh my gosh, we got so way off topic.
I don't know.
That was kind of fun. I liked going down that rat hole. So anyway, please donate to the Give, Send, Go. That would be a big thing. And we'll put a little bit more about it in the newsletter coming up. So if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, what do you need to do, Michael?
Subscribe.
Go to rope2.org. Yeah. Go to rope2.org. And the minute you get on there, just like with Wendy's Substack, which is what we're going to talk about today, it will say, would you like to join our email list? And you say, sure. And then you sign up. And Amber has another, she always has such good comments. Mm-hmm. Waste of taxpayer money is 65,000 registration cards sent in Oklahoma County that were returned. Taxpayer money is not a waste when a citizen's First Amendment right has been violated. Where is the document that you were asked to sign by the county election board that outlines what the standard? Oh, that's a good question, Amber Evans. That's a good point. Where's the document that you were asked to sign by the Oklahoma County Election Board that outlines what the standard of behavior of an election official is to be? Then she's laughing at you, Michael.
Yeah.
Thanks for laughing at him too, Amber. But that's a good point, though. That's a good point. That's a good question.
A great point. Did they ever give you anything, Jenny, when you signed up to be an alternate that said,
no, I did never
exactly how you're supposed to behave?
No, but may I point out something about behavior of an elected or appointed official?
Yes.
Do you know how many elected and appointed officials that I've read in the paper have been driving drunk and pulled over, or drunk in a parking lot, or taking some kind of medication and are pulled over?
Or corrupt. Well, Jenny, that's why they could get you on the conduct unbecoming of an elected official, because you weren't acting like them. You were acting like a responsible person doing the right thing. So yeah, that is conduct unbecoming of an elected official. So yeah, they have a case there.
They didn't know it was opposite day, Jenny. You should have told them.
Yeah. That's real. They nailed you on that one, Jenny.
I guess so. Yeah. That's wow.
Well, and I want to say before we move on to Wendy's deal, just to be clear, it's Oklahoma County is literally the only county that has this no access CCTV where things go off screen that should always, you should be able to see the entire chain of custody in the process here. Oklahoma County is the only county that has this off screen CCTV issue. Is that right, Jenny? I mean, I think
Yes.
that's right.
And well, and the interesting thing is we have the legislative oversight and fiscal transparency loft. We have that inside the House of Representatives, or it's affiliated with the House of Representatives at the Capitol. And Loft did their own study on election integrity in, I believe it came out in 2022. Don't quote me, I'm not sure, but I think it came out in 2022. I've read it, I just don't remember. And what they did was they picked several different counties. I don't know if they did it, scientifically, where you literally draw things out of a hat or whatever, but they picked several Oklahoma counties and they went and they observed their election procedures at each of these counties. And I want to say they did 6 or 7. And one of them was Oklahoma County. And they pointed out in this Loft study that Oklahoma County was the only one that was using CCTV. Everybody else had all of the board members, in the room where the absentee ballots were being counted and opened and administrated, and which is what the law says to do. And then they recommended that Oklahoma County do the same thing as everybody else, basically, which was to follow the law and everybody be in one room. So it's not just me. And they even came up with that was another thing I forgot about that Loft study. Wendy and Amber, you guys would be interested in this. So when I first went in to the Oklahoma County Election Board, and I will tell you, I had not been involved before. I'll just be honest. I had not been involved before. I hadn't been going to the meetings, which are open every time there's an election, and any county has an election and then needs to process those ballots. There's an open meeting surrounding that so the public can go to see that happening. Mm-hmm. It's just a transparency thing. So I had never done that before. I'm sorry, but I had not. And so when I went, I was so surprised because I thought it's a board. I haven't served on 45 boards or anything, so I'm not holding myself up as I'm some board member that knows all this stuff. But what I am saying is on all of the boards on which I have served, there were way more than 3 members. Way more. I mean, the minimum, I think, of the board that I've served on was 7, and as high as, I think, 50 or 40, it was ACOG. I don't remember how many cities and towns were involved in that. So when you have 3 members on a board, and in the case of county election boards, not just Oklahoma, any of them, it's a Republican, a Democrat, and then the secretary of the election board. So what if there was a real concern about the way the ballots were counted? So haven't you noticed in today's society, everything becomes a partisan ordeal? So few people are willing to back up and say, okay, well, hold on, let's see how things are going. Let's be unpartisan about this, right? And so can you imagine really having a concern, and you've got a member over here saying, I'm concerned, and the opposite member is saying, well, I'm not concerned at all. And then the secretary could be either or. So where is the real independent person here? Where's the ability to have more than one person basically affect the outcome of anything? And that was a huge question for me. And it was interesting because Loft actually talked about that same thing, that it was a 3-member board. And they also talked about another thing I brought up, which was and Wendi, I think you and Amber can both agree with this. In the law, in Title 26 and in the Oklahoma Administrative Rules, it says the Oklahoma Election Board. Okay, or the Oklahoma County Election Board, or the Oklahoma State Election Board. What is that? Is that all of the people that are employed by the board to do things like opening absentee ballots, or there are all kinds of employees in the election board. So is it those people, or is it the 3-member board that we're talking about? And Loft even said it's not clear in the it's not clear in the statute or in the administrative rules what they're referring to. And so that's a real problem too. When we have difficulties like that, it's something has to get fixed. We can't just keep overlooking it or pointing it out and going, "Oh, look," and then not doing anything about it. I mean, we have to do something about it.
Well, there's some confusion. I was reading the Loft report myself, and what I saw that was kind of astonishing, given the Oklahoma State Constitution sets up the provision to create the state election board. And all it says is that the legislature shall create a state election board that is to administer the elections. So according to the Oklahoma State Constitution, the legislature is supposed to direct and create and oversee the state election board. But when I got into that Loft report, I saw a bifurcation where all of a sudden we have the governor's office involved. There's 2 different election boards. You've got the state election board that's under the governor, and then you've got this other Oklahoma State election board over here. It's very confusing how all of a sudden something that is supposed to be strictly under the legislature all of a sudden gets bifurcated without changing the Constitution in Oklahoma to include the governor and also to create another entity under the governor, so that the governor's office all of a sudden is now involved in something that is supposed to be strictly a legislative duty. So what we have is, with the administrative state as well and all these rules being passed, we have people basically shoving their responsibility down the pike off onto other people because it's either too much or they don't have time to do this and they don't have time to do that. And so they allow administrative rules to be made to administer the laws without very much oversight at all. We've found that that things are just kind of pushed off on these administrative rules. There's very little oversight as to what goes on there. The legislators claim that they're busy, far too busy sometimes to look into all of this as it goes along. I've heard that excuse from lawmakers when I've talked to them.
Well, and I will point out there was not one Oklahoma lawmaker at that press conference, and there were several invited.
That's disturbing. I mean, we've had the same issue talking about elections. We get very few legislators that are actually involved or that want to hear about what's actually going on with our elections in Oklahoma.
And
so
I don't know why I don't know why that is. I mean, you would think that you're elected, so an election would make a difference to you, right? I mean, it would make a difference to you personally, not just overall even. So I don't understand the whole, right. I'm kind of out of that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense to me either, because if you're elected, our whole basis of governance, according to the Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, preceded the Constitution. So the Declaration of Independence says, we must have consent of the governed. If we do not have consent of the governed, we've got problems, because the government itself can be called into question. Nobody wants that. Yeah. So if we are not looking into making sure that all of our officials are sitting with the consent of the governed, and that's every single citizen that resides in this country, no matter their party affiliation, then what are we doing? We're the lawmakers, their number one job is supposed to protect and defend the Constitution, but also government is instituted simply to basically ensure our inherent rights from God, right?
Right.
So that is
our individual liberty.
That is their duty. I hear lawmakers still say to me, oh, well, our job is to make laws. Yeah. Well, actually, no, that's not your job. Your job is to make sure that you are protecting the rights of the citizens that are in your district, that live in your area. It's a representative government, and you're to be representing them and their interests and making sure that their inherent rights, which are given to them by God, are upheld, and that we seem to be so far away from that these days that it's getting to the point where you wonder what people are doing there in the first place. So,
well, you said something that is same thing happened to me. I was speaking to a lawmaker one time. It was Gary Bands, as a matter of fact. And I was in his office talking to him about Common Core. And he said, well, Jenny, our job is to come up here and make laws. And I was like, no, Gary, your job is to protect my individual liberty. And I think that I read an article just recently about the administrative state, since we've been talking about that on this podcast, and we've got to get on to our other part. But what you said and what I heard, or what you heard and what I heard, is part of the problem that we have today. Let's say you get elected and you go up to the Capitol. People want to, it's that whole progressive ideology notion that if you're going to go there, you need to be doing something. Yeah. Right. And it can't be repealing laws, because that's negative. That's kind of I don't know, and that has a negative connotation, repealing. So what they do is they go up, and to feel like they are doing their jobs, they say, yeah, we need a law for this, and yes, we need a law for this. And so what we do is keep creating these laws on top of laws on top of laws, until literally we have so many laws written on top of each other that you can't even untease them to figure out what law you're not following or have to follow.
Right. Somebody figured out recently, I believe I read that we could break, I forgot how many laws every day, just living our lives right at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you get officials that don't understand their job is not to rule over people and create laws, but to serve the people and make sure their interests are being heard and represented in the government. So it's flipped. It's basically flipped, and it's flipped in people's minds that are running for office, and it's flipped in the public's mind, what their lawmakers are there for. And it is an educational issue. I agree. We need to have better and more in-depth civics education. We have decent education and admin, but we could definitely use more in-depth civics education, not just government, not just history. But
well, and I think seniors now have to pass the citizenship test, I believe.
Yes. My son that just graduated, I was very proud of him. I was talking about election. I was talking about government in general, I think. And he said, Mom, people just don't seem to understand that XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, your government teacher actually taught you that? Yay.
That's great.
It was great. So yeah, we have decent education, but we need to get more in depth, especially with our seniors, I think, with our high school students, so that they come out and they can say everything I just said and everything you just said. They should be able to know that. And that way at age 18, when they're able to vote, they can start holding the lawmakers accountable to make sure they're doing their job. And it's educating our lawmakers, because I believe they're sincere in their intent. It's more of they've got it upside down in their own minds.
And I agree with you. I don't even think it is necessarily their fault. Plus, there's a bunch of pressure that goes on in there, that's put on the legislature by all kinds of, we've talked about the number of PACs and, private organizations that give money to candidates and elected officials in this state. And it's not just this state, it's everywhere. It needs to stop, but it's everywhere. Okay. Before we get because we're way off now, let's talk about what you wanted to talk about this morning. Let's talk about this. I can bring in my screen so that we can see. Let's try this one. Let's start with this one, maybe. Okay, let me get There you go. All right. You want to get us going on this? What is Westwin Elements?
Okay, Westwin Elements is a company that is coming into Lawton, Oklahoma. They probably already broken ground. I believe they have. The facility was supposed to be completed this year, I believe, if I read that correctly. It is a cobalt processing facility. The interesting thing about cobalt is it's necessary for the green energy agenda. And I started looking into when investigating elections, looking at elections. There is a national figure who looked at elections who also had somebody send him something on cartel activity. I read that. I remembered a national map, asked him to overlay the maps because with a geology background, this is what we do. We overlay maps. So there was almost a 1-to-1 correlation between the cities with cartel activity and suspected election fraud.
I'm going to show that. There's the map.
Yeah, so that is the map. That is from Seth Keshel. Some people in Oklahoma are familiar with him. He's been here a few times talking about election integrity. So that's that's the final article that I wrote. I wrote a series about this, and it's entitled Elections, Cartels, Green Energy, and the World Economic Forum Agenda, starting to bring all of this together. Because as a geologist, my thoughts go to, if I know where mines are located, I know where particular deposits for economic ore deposits are located in the U.S. I started wondering whether or not there might be an issue here. I was trying to figure out why people seem to care so much about Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Wow. I love Bartlesville. It's a beautiful little town. But politically, why is this such a hot topic in Oklahoma? Anybody that's involved with politics in Oklahoma knows that there was an interest in a GOP vice chair seat, so much so that the state party got involved, and there was a big mess there. So that never made sense to me until I started looking into ore deposits and looking into the history of Bartlesville. There's a company there that's called City Services that actually owns the Continental Mine in Arizona. Now, the Continental Mine in Arizona is a huge copper deposit. It's one of the largest in the U.S. And I found that interesting because City Services was bought out by Citgo. And right. If everyone is familiar with Citgo, that is owned by the Venezuelan government. So that really set off some alarm bells in my head. Why does the Venezuelan government now potentially control one of our largest copper deposits in this country, especially with the importance of copper in our everyday lives, including electricity and regardless of how you generate electricity. But so I started looking into this, and sure enough, when I looked up the cities that are on this map and looked up ore deposits and economic ore deposits, it's a 1-to-1 correlation between important ore deposits that are important for the green energy agenda and all of this other activity.
When you say cartel,
criminal
activity,
cartel
what are you talking about?
Criminal cartel activity. It's an uptick in criminal cartel activity that's been reported in these cities, in these locales across the United States. So the law enforcement, local law enforcement has reported in these cities an uptick in the cartel activity in their areas. That's what that means.
Interesting.
So there's Westwin coming in, and Oklahoma especially coming in with this cobalt processing facility. We do have the green energy agenda. We have the infrastructure plan that was passed with how many billions of dollars, right? That's going to be handed out to facilities that are mining critical minerals. We've had critical minerals being studied in this country since about 2018, 2019. The Trump administration actually started looking into critical minerals, rare earth minerals. Now, the way they define those as ones that are critical to national security and the green energy agenda here, which I found very interesting. It looks like they're, we're wondering what was going on. We know that China has surpassed us in rare earth element production for quite some time. Now, that was not really that big of a concern until we started pushing the green energy agenda, which I found very fascinating, considering that we still have a petroleum industry that has cleaned up their act with producing coal. We were all told that producing petroleum, we were all told that natural gas is clean burning. We want to burn natural gas, all of these different issues coming up with energy. So,
well, and Amber makes a good point. She wants everybody to know that Lawton is next to Fort Sill.
Yes, Lawton is next to Fort Sill. There are very concerning ways that these things are being brought into local communities. When you talk about expanding mines, when you talk about production facilities, cobalt has not been produced here in the United States for various reasons. I believe they tried to. There was something that happened recently in Idaho. Fishery got destroyed, essentially, and a company that was an Australian company was actually sued, and the EPA threw them out of the country because of their practices, because they destroyed this fishery in Idaho. So the cobalt's already had issues here.
Well, and I was reading too that they're saying they're trying to get away from using cobalt, not even just because of the toxicity of its refining, but because of the fact that it's basically primarily produced in the Congo, and they use almost slave labor and kid labor to get it.
Right. And if people don't know, cobalt is used in batteries. So it's using lithium ion batteries for electric vehicles. So it would be in high demand if we were going to still use those batteries. It is my understanding that the new technology for electric vehicle batteries is zinc. So, we're building this facility at the same time that the industry itself is moving away and wanting to use zinc. Now, you can actually, cobalt's found in deposits with zinc as well, not just copper. Cobalt's usually found with copper minerals, and it's produced and extracted about the same time you're extracting copper. Now, this facility is going to use a new procedure to extract the cobalt, which was developed by a Canadian company. So what people need to understand is you have these foreign companies that are coming into the United States with these U.S. companies that are being developed, and basically it looks like some of these companies are being formulated out of thin air, basically with people that don't have backgrounds in the science or what's being done. And they're getting this government money, and they're getting this grant money in order to start these facilities and go in and talk to localities and get the local officials on board. Okay. And then the localities are also throwing in taxpayer money. And I remember Neanne Clinton, I was watching that show when she was on here talking about this with the solar facility up in Enid, and the fact that you had your local officials looking like that, they're bringing in the taxpayers. Historically may not have seen a return for their money. Some of these companies are taking the localities to court, claiming contract violations. So the taxpayers are on the hook from beginning to end, and they may never see their money back.
Now, and you and I talked about this article, and I sent it to you because I found this. And if you're interested in this particular topic, which I suggest you brush up on it because it's very interesting, this article particularly, see if you can, I'll give you here's the URL to it. Oh, and then Amber had another good comment. We probably need to get up here. Hold on one second, Amber. But there is the URL for this particular article, although you can just look up Republicans seek to help politically wired metals company. This was a really interesting article because basically, if you go down through here, it talks about the fact that Westwin is basically made up of a lot of Republican political operatives.
Right.
And that not only that, but then they go on to talk about the fact mining for money. Mining companies have asked for the government for years for incentives to increase the domestic supply of minerals. And so there's a lot of money out there to do this right now. And again, it's taxpayer dollars that we're talking about. The Inflation Reduction Act also assured Washington, D.C. more of Mining Town by offering programs that had even more funding. So that's something that we need to mention, and you might.
Right. That, in the third article in the series, I actually go into the coal situation, but this is very similar, and it's going on with various forms of energy across the United States. In some states, it's hydroelectric power. You have a company called Rye Development that is partnering with outside financial firms that are coming in and they're financing these things, and it's all taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And you're wondering why all of a sudden we're redoing the entire electrical or basically the entire energy system in the United States and moving to different methods, but the government is throwing a ton of our money into changing this situation, going in and it looks like upending localities, talking the local city councils into approving these, and they're approving them not transparently. And this is disturbing to me. They are not giving the citizens the information when they are asking. There are citizens, it's my understanding down in Lawton, that we're asking about the permitting, who's sending the permits, who's going to approve the permits. And they were basically told that the officials had signed a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, I don't think as a public official, you can sign a non-disclosure agreement with a company if you're bringing it into your locality so that the citizens don't know the process by which this facility is going to be approved. And
I'm going to stop you there and say that's the biggest problem that we're having in these small towns, because we're going to be, Rope is staying on this because we're going to be doing some exposés of some small towns and how crooked some small towns out there in Oklahoma are, and they find ways to funnel taxpayer money into their own pockets. And that's something that we really have to keep in mind. But I think that in at least one of these articles, it talks about the fact that Westwin says that it was $3 million, but really it was $24 million. Right. And they can get away with it because they have these economic development authorities that are usually created out of a trust. They're made like a trust. And there are certain disclosures that don't have to be made in these trusts. And that's why they set these things up in these towns.
Well, this is why it's very important that officials remember, number one, their oath to the Constitution and their actual job, which is to defend the inherent rights of the citizens, not companies that come in and throw money at you, whether it's federal money or any other money. If what you're doing is working against the citizens and they believe it's against their interests, and if you're afraid to show them papers and be transparent about what's going on that's going to affect their lives, their children, where they live, and everything else, then that's huge red flags right there for me when it comes to the actual officials that maybe it's very difficult to determine whether or not they're actually in dereliction of their duty to the people that they're supposed to be serving. And the citizens in these areas need to start working on holding their officials more accountable with these matters and not letting these things go.
Right. And you talked about the Nian Clinton video that we had on the solar panels. And do you remember what Nian said? And telling everybody who's out there watching this morning, read my lips, listen to what I'm saying. Neanne was very concerned about what was going on in the Enid city government, which is why she got so involved around the solar project. And she got on their mailing list of all their agendas and all of the communications that were publicly offered. And then she would go to these meetings or watch them online and know what was going on the agendas. People, especially if you're in a small town, please realize that you absolutely need to be going to these meetings, because there's a really good chance in Oklahoma, sadly, that your town is full of people who are trying to make money for themselves, not help your town.
Yeah, and I've heard this
Amber's right.
all across, because you've got up in around the Bartlesville area, we have a lead zinc, one of the most prolific lead zinc mines in the entire country.
Oh wow.
Is up in Pitcher, Oklahoma, which is a Superfund site, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, and I bring this up in the third article, I want everybody to, I'm going to read you the definition of kleptocracy. Kleptocracy, yes. Actually, who was it? Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk actually brought this up. And people need to be thinking about this. A kleptocracy comes from the Greek. It's also referred to as a thievocracy. So it's where you have a government whose corrupt leaders use political power to expropriate the wealth of the people and the land they govern, typically by embezzling or misappropriating government funds at the expense of a wider population. One feature of political-based socioeconomic thievery is that there's often no public announcement explaining or apologizing for misappropriations, nor any legal charges or punishment levied against the offenders. Now,
I was going to share that so people could actually read it.
Yes.
Because you did a great job in your, and guys, read Wendy's Substack. It's, let me get it and put it in here. Everybody needs to read Wendy's Substack. These articles that she's been doing, she did a whole 3-part series on this. I didn't know half that stuff. It's information you really need to be on our Substack and reading this, but that's the definition.
Yeah, and the thing about it is while I focus on coal because of its importance with rare earth mineral extraction, and also the fact that it looks like Illinois coal is being sent to China instead of being processed for rare earth element extraction in Illinois, where the coal waste resides. Why are we shipping all of this overseas to China? And people have to wonder, they are burning coal like crazy in China, right? And they're getting away with it where everybody else is getting hammered, right? For using coal potentially, according to this climate change business. And as a geologist, I can tell you that in and of itself is questionable to me as far as man's involvement in that. That seems to me to be pushed without a whole lot behind it, not to mention models that are consistently proven wrong. So it's very difficult to understand why all of a sudden is a big emergency when everyone knows that the climate changes over Earth's history period by itself before man was even involved here, right? So the question becomes, and I've got this written down, we've got to start looking at our government and seeing what exactly it's doing, especially in our local communities. When they come in and they bring in all of this money, these foreign corporations that are partnering with U.S. companies, where our taxpayer money is going, they make it sound good, of course, in order to get you to bring in these facilities. But who's really benefiting from this? In Southern Illinois, they're telling people, oh, you should be happy about this because we're going to re-educate you to do something else, to do these other jobs. And it's like they're giving you something. But the thing is, the federal government took it away to begin with. In Southern Illinois, the EPA shut down the coal mines. These were very good paying jobs. It was a thriving community. in the 80s. And then all of a sudden they come in and say, oh, you have a lot of sulfur in your coal. We're shutting them down. So that threw the entire area into a depression for a very long time. Basically, it's not really recovered from it. If you go on YouTube, you're going to find all of these videos about these little southern Illinois towns that used to be these mining towns that are now basically almost ghost towns. And so when you've got the government coming in and shutting something down, then all of a sudden they're coming back, and they're coming back with a ton of money. And you start looking into who's behind it, who the companies are, who's benefiting. I mean, does anybody remember Solyndra? We had over $600 million just disappear. Okay, so
I knew Michael would laugh really loud over that.
Yeah, the company went really bankrupt, right? So we have to be better stewards of property rights. I talk about the mineral rights. I talk about the old maxims of law that tell people, hey, guess what? According to common law, when you own property, you own everything below your feet and everything up to the sky. So according to that principle, and according to property laws, the Constitution, you own all of that. The fact that the state might come in and try to separate your property, your surface rights from your mineral rights, I believe there's probably constitutional amendments that need to happen before those laws are passed. So people have to really start digging into this and start digging into the fact that maybe we have the same issue going on that seems to have been going on over and over again in history. And that is where people come in, and aristocrats and people with a lot of money, a lot of wealth, with government backing, come into an area and basically, because they've set the laws up ahead of time or whatever, can come in, take the wealth out of an area and just leave the people crumbs.
Well, look at what Amber said. The same thing's happening with our timber we log in the United States. It gets sent overseas to be milled and then sold back to us. America's timber industry and the byproduct should be part of putting Americans back to work. The majority of the mills in the Northwest shut down or were majorly scaled back a couple or more decades ago. Decimated communities, especially the Oregon coast. Amber's from Oregon. Now, over 80% of the people on the Oregon coast are in public assistance, jobs taken away and shipped overseas. Excellent point, Amber. And I think you made the point so eloquently, Wendi, that we literally have the United States government and then often our state government coming, probably because they're getting money from the federal government, manipulating these communities, putting people out of business for one reason or another, and then decimating these communities. And then what do you do once those communities are decimated? It's pretty hard to fight back, isn't it?
Well, and you know what the kicker is? We're paying for it.
Yeah.
They're using taxpayer money. They're using our money against our interests. And that is something that people really need to start thinking about. We're paying for our own demise. And I don't want to say demise, but yeah, we are paying for all of this to happen. And here in the United States, we're supposed to be up here. We, the people. Our public servants are supposed to be serving our interests and defending our God-given inherent rights down here, not taking money from the outside, not taking our own money and then taking it from us and then leaving us, something that's corrupt, that's working against our interests. You could consider that legalized theft. I don't know any other way to describe it. And I do put that, very strongly in part 3 of my series. And then I line out in part 4 the issue with the mineral rights. The first 2 are talking about the introduction with the correlation. And then the second part deals with the actual ore deposits so people can look them up, look up these towns, look up these states, see the minerals I'm talking about, and then trying to figure out, wait a minute, what's been going on under our eye, under our noses, basically for the past few decades, it looks like, here in this country.
Well, so, Michael, you had a book up there, and oh my God, not another book. You're going to kill me.
Yeah, I just wanted to tag on to that, what Wendi just said. in this, and you know, I wanted to do that book report show
Oh,
for
yeah.
us sometime, but this is one of the books that I think every single person, and even this book ought to be a required reading in school. This is John Perkins, and his book is Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and he literally talks about all through his past. He was a private guy. He didn't work for the government, but he was a private guy employed by the government, by the United States government, and by these corporations, these large corporations. And his job was to go get these other countries, or find resources, you know, all around the world, get these countries in debt to where they lost their own natural resources to American corporations, to the American government, this or that, you know, and it's just an entire ploy. And he talks, you know, he mainly talks about a lot of countries like Panama and a lot of South American countries and some other countries, but they literally just go in strategically. They find these resources like this cobalt deal down here. They find these resources. They partner with the local government. They promise them all this stuff. The local government, in one way or another, they know they're going to default. They know they're going to not be able to repay the loans. They know that there's going to be issues. And ultimately, it turns those resources back over to these large corporations, or back to the government, to the U.S. government.
Yeah.
That was his job. That was his literal job. That's what he was employed to do.
Yeah. And this, you know, there is a very concise way to put this. And we saw it during COVID, right? The government creates a problem. People profit off of it. And then they come back around on the back end.
Yeah.
And they profit off the solution.
Yeah.
So you have problem, the cycle.
Problem,
you know,
reaction,
it seems
solution.
to happen over and over again, where
Problem,
you've got our
reaction,
government
solution.
actually creating problems for us that that may not even exist. We saw the issue with COVID, right? It was supposed to be very deadly, this, that, and the other, and it turns out being no worse than the flu. Okay, so you have all of these businesses shut down, all these people put out of business, all of these businesses ruined. So you have this problem solution series where then they come in on the back end and say, oh, we have the solution, we have this vaccine, and you know, people are profiting off of that. You know, regardless of whether or not we could talk about the lack of informed consent with those substances, a lot of people thought that they were, you know, people's intent on taking those substances was very noble. They wanted to help. They wanted to help society, you know, do what needed to be done, but they were not given, in my mind, the informed consent necessary in order to participate in that. These were experimental substances, but they were coming in with that. We have more hospitals being built, right? We have all kinds of issues. So we've got problems continuously being given to the public, given to the people, foisted on the people, actually. And
I would say created. They create those problems.
Create the problem.
They devise them and create them.
Yes. And they are profiting on the front end, and they are profiting on the back end, and they are using our taxpayer money for all of it. So,
well, and who's going to stop them?
Yes,
who's going to stop them?
Right. Well, it has to be we the people, right? We are it.
And the only way that you can do that is doing what Neanne did, going to your, you know. Part of the reason I became mayor in Luther was because we had some massive problems. We didn't have money. There was, I mean, and Luther's taxed for the upkeep of Luther. And there was a real problem about that. And they wanted to get this group of people that had been in there before out. And when I came in, we had $100 and something thousand maybe. And when I left, thanks to not just me, but all the other people that were elected to the board, we left the town with over $1 million, you know, in savings, because we quit, you know, pretending like that money was our money and we could do anything with it. So it went back to the people. It's there for the people. And so even if you end up having to run for an office yourself, your town council, your school board, as Michael and I have said a million times until we're
Right.
blue in the face. Whatever it is, you when you sit back and go, well, I can't do anything about it, there's nothing I can do, then we get nowhere.
Right.
Then
You
we're
have to
nowhere. That's
start-
part of the reason I filed that lawsuit. Somebody has to do something.
Right. And this has to be taken care of at the local level. If the locals start pushing back and the people in the localities go to these meetings and say, no, 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 you're not doing this on our watch. You're using our taxpayer money. Our money is going into this. You can't just come in and force this on us without answering questions, without informing the public. And having more. I mean, sometimes I think they just have a couple of meetings before they approve these things, and they don't advertise them very well. So not very many people attend. But then again, it's like our elections, right? Half of our people in Oklahoma don't know when our off November elections are. They're not advertised very well, and they are very poorly attended. You have very low turnout. Why is that? The government that we are paying, that we are funding, is not informing us on what they're doing, and they're not advertising it all over the place. You know that, something can go viral in a second. Why don't we know when our elections are? Why do we keep hearing this from people?
Well, I always wondered. I mean, we've got electronic billboards now.
Don't know about these meetings, and what the ramifications are of the meetings and what these companies want to do. I mean, here in Edmond, we did have some people show up to protest a local Walmart, I think, that was going to go on in their neighborhood, and they're worried about this and worried about that. But these are, these people were engaged, and it was affecting their actual neighborhood right next to them. So,
well, and I think
about these
they won too.
Yeah, is that everybody in these communities is going to be affected by these businesses coming in and by this money that's coming in to develop these minerals. What if you happen to own a piece of property? Do you know what's under your feet? Do you know whether or not there are minerals underneath your feet? Have you talked to the state geological survey to come in and tell you, oh yes, there's a potential that you have a deposit here. You may want to make sure that and I would tell people now to go in and argue you own that anyway, regardless of the severing by state law, because that may be done without constitutional provision. We really have to start looking at it and going this way, I think. And Amber will probably back me up on this. She'll write it, she'll type it in here. Making sure the administrative code follows our laws, but making sure that our laws are in line with the Constitution, because if they are not in line with the Constitution, the rest of all this down here is a waste of time. So it's very important that people start looking at and insisting that the superior law of the state, the superior law of the land, our state and our federal constitutions are being followed with everything that's being done, And the mineral rights and the property rights, are just a small part of that. So yeah, we don't, I didn't know. Amber says she didn't know. 3 years ago, she and I met when we were looking into the 2020 election. And then that has led to all of this other investigation that we've done over the last 3 years into the elections, and then into these other areas that, are just ringing off alarm bells. But the solution is the same in every instance. The people have to start getting involved locally, because if you start pushing back locally on this and you insist that your officials don't take money for these things, I mean, they're going to have to resist taking federal money, taking taxpayer money, because in the end, the history of these endeavors over and over again is the local people lose. They lose their property, they lose their environment.
And let me point out, it's way too late after that happens for you to say, oh, woe is me, and I shoulda, coulda, woulda. I mean, at that point in time, you're screwed. I mean, there's nothing that you can do about it. And let me point out that I know a lot of people, and granted, people are going to go, well, Jenny, you're probably the most cynical person ever, because I mean, I've gotten to that point because things are so upside down and backwards. But let me just point out that here in Lincoln County, we've talked about this before. Go look it up on our podcast about the wind turbines that we've had numerous interviews with people over in Lincoln County about this. And I want to point out, people in Lincoln County are upset about wind turbines coming in and having the possibility of wrecking the enjoyment of their property. And they are getting together and pushing back on this. And you would not believe, once the word got out and it spread and it spread and it spread, and all we need to do is tell one person who will tell one person who will tell one person who will tell one person, and you have a big group. We do have the power. We do.
Right.
The Constitution is on our side. The state laws are on our side in some instances not so at all. But the point of the matter is that if we remain ignorant, if we say, it's too much trouble for me, I can't go to that meeting, I'm not gonna, well, I don't vote, because are you kidding? I vote in the presidential election. You are the problem. You are. Not anybody
Falling
else.
for the narrative.
You are.
Right.
So you absolutely have to get involved, and you absolutely have to do something in your own neighborhood to make this stop. So we are going to go further with the Westwin story. It'll be in August. I don't know what the date's going to be yet. Wendi and I are going to work that out, but there's more to this story. And we do have a local person in Lawton who's very interested in sharing with us the information that he's collected from attending meetings and the FOIA requests that he's gotten from the Lawton City Council. So I think, stay with us on that, because I think one of the things that, I mean, we've been an education company, and or an education organization, and that's kind of how we started out. But, at this point in time, I think, Michael, you feel the same way too, right? I mean, there are so many problems out there. I think we need to talk about all the problems that we can find that we can bring to your attention. So,
Yeah.
Right. And I think for a lot of these, the solution is the same. And that is get involved, go to the meetings, take your neighbors, talk to your neighbors. There's strength in numbers.
Yep.
And always remember that Article 2, Oklahoma Constitution, all, not just some, but all political power is inherent in the people. It resides with the people.
Right.
So
but if you don't know that, and you remain
don't know
ignorant
that,
about
and
that,
you grab your neighbors to start exercising that. And that means going to the meetings, holding people accountable, doing your homework, making sure you know the issues going in, and making sure your officials know where you stand, and speaking out. I believe you mentioned Mick's podcast at the beginning of the show, right?
Yeah,
She
Mick
live streamed your press conference. What is she always saying? Stand up, speak out. People really need to start taking this to heart. Otherwise, we're going to have this happen. And the only way, like you said, to stop it, Jenny, is to have the people at the localities, at the local level, stop these issues from coming in, and making sure, if you don't want this facility, go in and make sure that your council members know that, and that you will protest it, or that you'll speak against it, or whatever, and start getting that done, and start using your voice, because all political power inherent in the people in the United States means we use our voice. And there's Mick. Yes.
And I do want to hit up Mick because of the fact that, I mean, she just like so many of us who are sick of the media spin on everything. Mick is also trying to, she's absolutely trying to get out the actual what's actually going on and
Yeah.
not just accepting the media spin on everything. So go visit Mick's website. It's intentional with Mick Meow. And I'll put I'll put this in here, her website in here, so that you can see that. And I don't know where the video of the press conference is on there. But she put it up. I think she did it absolutely live on there. So it's on there somewhere. But she's been very involved in the health issues. So that's another reason to check her out. So, all right. Well, we are about to the end of our time. It's 1:20. Again, I can't say enough about visiting Wendy's Substack. Those articles that she wrote, and I haven't had time to dig into them completely in depth, but I scanned all of them the other night, Wendi, and they're so good. I mean, you're really a good writer. I mean, it's very specific. You can figure out what the issue is. You're very specific about being specific about the issue. So please find Wendy's Substack also as well and tune in. Anything going on with you, Mr. Michael, for the week?
No. Happy 4th of July. Celebrate the independence, our freedom.
You know, I don't like saying 4th of July. I like saying Independence Day because 4th of July holds no meaning. It's Independence Day. It's the day that we became a free country and got our independence from England so that we didn't have to have a king rule over us. And yet what we're doing is we're letting city councils rule over us. We're letting governors, we're letting mayors, we're letting
all these administrators make the rules that we have to follow that aren't part of our Constitution.
Right. And the interesting thing is, and people should know this, we have kings throughout the Bible, right? But God says, you know what? I don't think you want that.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I believe our founders were trying to go back to, government the way God intended for us, and that is a Republican form. So yes, Independence Day is when we try to reestablish a Republican form of government, because after how many hundreds of years, man figured out, oh, gee, maybe kings aren't the way to go.
And somebody will freak out because you mean Democrats, Republicans. That's not what we mean.
No.
A Republican form of government. We are a republic. We're not a democracy.
Right.
America is a republic.
And George Washington said, don't form political parties. It'll ruin the country.
And then what happened? Yeah. The uniparty nonsense killed us all. Okay. All right. So let's talk about what's going to be on next Wednesday. Don't forget, we're still only live on Wednesdays until mid-August. So Wednesday, we're going to have a really great show. I'm very excited about this. Kevin and Janelle Batts are going to come talk to us about their movie, Trans Oklahoma, which is, I've been privy to the movie and seen it. And it's a very, very, very interesting, very sad, but then very uplifting movie. And it's about people who have taken the ultimate step and changed their sex and then have had real life regret about that. And it's a really excellent movie. And what ended up happening was our very tolerant alphabet rainbow community does not like the movie. And the Bats, who are the producers of the movie, had it scheduled at a cinema called the Rodeo Cinema here in Oklahoma City. And the tolerant rainbow alphabet people forced the cinema to cancel the showing of the movie there. So that's extremely sad, and it's a good thing. We're going to hear about that from them and have them talk a little bit about the movie and how they're now getting the movie out, because they're like us. They're not going to be silenced. Give it a shot. Try me. Try them. Try us. All right. So, on Friday, we are going to replay our interview with Cindy Bird. Julie and I did a great interview with Cindy Bird. She's our state auditor and inspector. If you don't know, she's really great. She talks about the audit that they did on the COVID money and school. And it was a really great interview. So if you haven't seen it, be sure to tune in. It was wonderful. And then actually next Friday, we're going to have Matt Failing, the replay of our interview with attorney Matt Failing. And he's going to talk about ethics, which so many people don't even know what that word means anymore. But we're going to talk to him about that. So please stay tuned. I know that July is a busy one, and I know summer is a busy one, but tune in when you got a second. You can find us on Rumble and YouTube. You can find us on X. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on my Facebook page and on the Rope Facebook page and on Telegram. So there's no excuse. We're everywhere.
And don't forget, we need to support Jenny in this endeavor against, the state following their own laws with her give, send, go in this lawsuit.
All right, hold on. I'll put it up one more time before we leave.
Well,
Maybe.
and she's suing as a First Amendment violation, and that is very serious. People need to understand that officials violating your rights as a citizen, punishable under federal law as well. So did you file that in federal court, Jenny, or is that?
Yes, Mark filed it in federal. My attorney filed it in federal court. Yes, because the way I understand it, any constitutional issue can only be filed in federal court. You can't adjudicate that in.
Right. And this is also a time for officials maybe to start looking into their responsibilities and how they can be held responsible by citizens if rights are violated. There was a recent Supreme Court decision on that this year as well, this spring. So that may come into play as well.
All right. Well, guys, everybody, please have a happy Independence Day. Be safe. No shooting Roman candles off in your hand. None of that.
You gotta take all the fun, Jenny.
It's like every year you hear of somebody doing something like that and you're like, oh my word, stop doing that goofy crap. Okay. All right. Well, it was good to be on with you guys today. Michael, it's always good to see you. Wendi, you're great. Amber, thank you always for chiming in. It's such a big help to have you chime in, and all of you who are on today. Thank you so much for being with us. And we will see you again live next Wednesday. But then don't forget, tune in on Friday and you can see our interview with the SAI. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you soon.